Today I'm going to experiment again, and I'm also going to fulfill a request. I got a request from Kurt in upstate New York quite a few months ago, and he said please come up with a better recipe for apples because it was apple season and they had apple pies, apple turnovers, apple tarts. He wanted something different other than the ubiquitous pies and pastries, but I couldn't find anything. And then a week ago, a fan of the website sent me a scan of a cover of a book that she bought, a cookbook for like $1 used, and on the cover was this apple swirl Bundt cake that looks so good. So I wrote back and I said, I want that recipe. And that's what I'm going to do today, this apple swirl Bundt cake. First thing I have to cope with though is the apples, so let's deal with the apples. I have here 6 Granny Smith apples. The recipe calls for 2 1/4 cups of peeled, cored, and grated apple, and then 2 1/4 cups of peeled, cored, and diced apples. Granny Smith is mentioned, and the recipe says about 3 small apples for each of those. These seem like medium apples, so I would say you need a total of 6 small to medium Granny Smith apples. Using a vegetable peeler, I'm just going to peel these, and then I'll cut them in half and core them. This will only take me a few minutes. To core an apple, what I use is an old silver spoon that I've had for many, many years. It was used by someone so much to stir a pot that it's all worn down along here, and this edge is kind of sharp. So it makes it really easy to work with as far as just cutting into an apple and cutting out the core. You can do the same thing to get the stem out and the bottom out. That little bud at the bottom. Like so. I have my other 5 to do, and then I'll be ready to start dicing and shredding apple. And here's a little trick for you. If you want to stop your apples from turning brown, this one's already starting to brown, put a little bit of lemon juice in a bowl, and with a pastry brush, just paint your apples with lemon juice, and the acid will prevent the apples from oxidizing, which is what happens when they turn brown. Half my apples here I'm going to grate. So I have here a grater shredder, and that's all I want, is just a kind of a shred. And this will take me a while, and then I'll dice the remaining apple. So there's my shredded apples. To dice these, I'm going to do them pretty much the way I would do an onion. Cut them that way first, and then cut them across into little cubes. That'll give me some larger chunks of apple. That should give me some texture in my cake. And then again, to protect these from browning, I'm already seeing some of the shredded apple browning. Put a couple teaspoons of lemon juice in there. Mix it all up. Okay, these are done, so I'm just going to cover this with plastic wrap and set this aside. And then I can move on to my dry ingredients. In a large bowl, I have 4 1/2 cups, which is about 22 ounces or 624 grams by weight of all-purpose flour. To that, I'm going to add 1 1/4 cups, 250 grams of packed light brown sugar. I would say you can use medium brown or even dark brown. I don't know that it matters all that much. 1 cup, 200 grams of granulated white sugar. 1 tablespoon of ground cinnamon. 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking soda. 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt, kosher salt if you like to use it. And then finally 1.5 teaspoons of ground ginger. And then using a whisk, I'm going to break up my brown sugar and mix everything together until it's smooth and mixed well. This is nicely mixed together. I'm happy with that. Now I'm ready to move on to my wet ingredients. I'm going to put into this bowl 5 eggs, and then I'm going to beat these lightly just to combine them. That's good enough. And then moving back to my dry ingredients, I'm going to make a well in the middle, put my eggs in the middle, and I'm going to add, in case I didn't mention it, that was 5 large eggs. I have here 1 3/4 cups, which is 414 milliliters of vegetable oil. You can use canola oil. I'm using corn oil. And then finally I need 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because each one of these dropper things is 1/4 teaspoon. And then you want to just mix all this together into a wet batter. So there is my nice wet mixture. This actually resembles wet dough, not a wet batter. Now, returning back to my apples. I'm going to fold all my apples in there. Now it's going to take a few minutes, and this bowl is very big. Rather, this volume is very big. I feel as though my bowl isn't big enough. It's very full. So I'm going to fold all my apples in. This will take a few minutes. I am in the meantime heating my oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. That is 163 degrees Celsius. All right, now I've got what looks like a cake batter. I'm going to set this aside. This next step confuses me a little bit. Into a medium saucepan, you put 8 ounces of cream cheese. 8 ounces is about 227 grams, preferably at room temperature. 1/2 cup, which is 2.2 ounces, 62 grams of confectioner's sugar, that's powdered sugar. 2 tablespoons all-purpose flour. 1 large egg, and then finally you need about a tablespoon of orange zest. What confuses me about this is the recipe doesn't say why you put it in a pan, although I'm assuming a pan is a good indicator that this is going to get heated, maybe just enough to melt that cheese. So I'm going to put this on the stove for a moment, stir this while I'm warming it up. I warmed this up just enough to melt the cheese. I got it away from the heat. You don't want to cook the egg, otherwise you'll end up with scrambled egg in there. And this pan is already cool to the touch. I barely warmed this up, just enough to melt that cheese and give me a nice liquid there. I'm assuming that's what the recipe wants. I have a 15-cup Bundt pan here that I have sprayed with non-stick spray, and then I dusted it lightly with flour. And then I got to get my batter in there, but I'm thinking I don't want to, this is so big, I don't want to try to pour it in there. So I'm going to use a ladle. This is actually something called a spoon. And I want to get half of my batter in there, or at least fill the pan up halfway, the Bundt pan. Okay, so there's my bowl about half full. This is a bit tricky. You want to put this in, but trying to avoid the sides of the Bundt pan. Just get it into the center. Push it down in. Okay. Some of it's going to touch the side of the bowl. It's doing it right there, but can't be avoided entirely. And then with a knife, you want to swirl that in. You don't want to mix it in. You just kind of want to swirl it so that you have a look. Okay, that's enough. I don't want to overdo that. And then finally, top it with the remainder of the batter, or as much as you need to fill this Bundt pan. I might have too much here, although I don't think so. I think I have just about enough. And I want to cover as much of that swirl as I can. Ooh, look at that. That is full. Going to clean this up a little bit, and I'll be ready to put this into the oven. This needs to bake, I mentioned 325 degrees Fahrenheit, 163 degrees Celsius. This needs to bake for approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to actually use a digital read thermometer. I want to see an internal temperature of close to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 93 degrees Celsius. This is where making a dumb mistake can lead to a brilliant idea. The instructions didn't say to combine the swirl ingredients in a pan. They were supposed to be combined in a bowl. And when I write up the recipe, I'll make sure that I don't make that mistake again. However, what if the cream cheese mixture is too thick to swirl into the batter? It turns out that heating it a little bit, warming it up till it liquefies, gave me a really nice texture that could be easily swirled into the cake batter. So I am going to put that in the recipe as an option if the swirl ingredients are too thick to swirl into the batter, because it worked. I think it worked perfectly. And here it is. This is just out of the oven, still piping hot. I've made other Bundt cakes before. This might subside a little bit, and that's fine because it's going to have to go onto a plate. And if that settles down a little bit, it'll fit better on a plate. I have to let this cool in the pan for about 10 minutes, and then I can turn it out onto a cooling rack and let it cool thoroughly. Okay, this has been cooling now for 10 minutes. This is the scary part. Let's see. I can see it separating a little bit from the edges, so I think it'll come out okay, but it has me nervous. The pan is still a little bit hot, so okay, so far so good. Yes, that's a plane going overhead. Can I handle this? It's hot, but ooh, got it. Look at that. That is a beautiful cake. That is wonderful. All right, I'm going to let that cool thoroughly. It's probably going to take an hour or so, and then I'll be ready to glaze it. In the meantime, I'm going to make my glaze. We're coming to the home stretch now. There's my cake. Isn't that beautiful? Came out fantastic. This is cooled now. I'm ready to make my glaze. And that's going to be a caramel glaze. So I have to caramelize sugar. I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I've got a smallish medium pan here on the stove. I want something with high sides because at one point in this process it's going to boil up, flare up. I'm putting in here 1.5 cups. This is 300 grams of granulated sugar, and then 1/2 cup, 188 milliliters of water, and then a small amount, 1/2 teaspoon of fresh lemon juice. Going to bring my heat up under that and over medium high heat. I'm going to let this heat up and my sugar dissolve. You don't want to stir this a lot, but you can swirl it around the pan a little bit. My sugar water mixture, this is also called a simple syrup, that's come to a boil. It's not really hot right now because the water, which boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius, is keeping the temperature down. But you continue to cook this and you're going to cook the water out of it, and as the water comes out, the concentration of sugar increases and it'll start increasing in heat until the sugar starts to brown a little bit. That's the caramelization process. I'm going to heat this up to a temperature of about 340 degrees Fahrenheit, 171 degrees Celsius. I should see a nice golden color in that syrup. I just tested the temperature on that. That's up to it's over 340. So I'm turning the heat off on that. You can see that golden color in there. That's the caramelization. Now, using my whisk, I've got a motorized whisk here. I'm going to put in, this is 1/4 cup, 2 ounces, 57 grams of unsalted butter. I'm using clarified butter here. That shouldn't flare up because there's no water in the clarified butter. It's just pure butter fat. Blend that in. And this is what's going to flare up. This is 3/4 cup, 177 milliliters of heavy cream, whipping cream. See it boil up? All right. Beautiful. Now I need to let this cool. You can cool this naturally. What I did was I filled my sink with cold water. I'm going to transfer this to the sink, float it in the sink, and that'll cool this down fairly quickly. So this is cooled down now, my caramelized sugar with the butter in it. What I have here is 1 cup, 4.4 ounces, roughly 125 grams of confectioner's sugar. And I'm going to blend that in. If I have to, I'll get a mixer out and mix this well to get it all incorporated. I'm thinking that little battery operated mixer won't be strong enough. This is my immersion blender with a whisk tip on it. Okay, that looks very nice. Nice and smooth. That took less than a minute. Now the picture that I saw had the glaze on top in a very thin, lacy sort of way. So what I'm thinking I might do, I put a Ziploc bag in that bowl just to hold it. I'm going to put my glaze in there. I have way more than I need here. You can put the glaze on as thick or as thin as you want. I've tasted a bit of the cake, and it's not too sweet. So there's room for sweetness in the glaze, but I don't like things cloyingly sweet. So I'm probably going to go light on the glaze. But I already know who I'm going to give this to, and I think they like things sweet, but we'll see. And then what I'm going to do is take my bag out, seal it, and I'm thinking if I just cut a tiny bit off the corner there, I can get just a little stream coming out that I can put on my cake. Let's see how that works. I put a really small hole in there. Let's see how this works. If I hold it close, I don't get the curling. So I'm going to go back and forth over this cake until I feel as though I have enough glaze on there that I'm happy with the way it looks. I'm going to stop right there. I think that cake looks good just like that. I'm going to clean up my dish a little bit and then I'll be ready to serve. I'm ready now to cut into my cake. Feels nice and firm and well done as I draw the knife through it. Nice big piece for myself. And then with a little server here. Look at that. With that swirl inside there. You can serve it that way, but it would probably be easier to eat if you were to lay it down. All right, let's see what that tastes like. All right, I am ready to taste this because I really like cake, but I don't like those cakes that have 1 inch of cake and then a ½ inch of frosting on top. I like this better because it's glazed, it has some frosting on it, but what you get is the cake. Where do I start? This looks so good. Well, that's good. It's got the chunks of apple in there. You can taste that orange glaze, not the glaze, the orange swirl. So it has that orange flavor in it, but it's not cloyingly sweet. It's got a nice sweet flavor, but it's got a nice delicate flavor. This is a very, very good cake. Okay, excuse me. I'm going to go enjoy my afternoon snack. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit my website, mobilehomegourmet.com, and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.